I thought I'd like to just to start out with say a few words about meditation, or as I prefer, silent sitting, since we're going to be doing it a certain amount of it today. The reason I prefer the term silent sitting over meditation carries a certain amount of baggage with it, you know, in terms of expectations about what should happen or shouldn't happen during that time. So silent sitting hopefully takes away some of that expectation, where we can just sit, and the mind may or may not be silent, right? If there's a desire or an expectation to make the mind silent, it won't happen, right? There'll be two things going on in the mind. You know, one is whatever chattering it may be doing, and then another thought saying that shouldn't be happening. And somehow we believe that that opposition will somehow solve the problem, you know. Like the Middle East war, it'll never be resolved, you know, it'll just go back and forth. So the other alternative is just to allow it to be, right? And that's the one thing that we're not convinced is a good idea. You know, just to let the mind do whatever it does. You know, we think, well, that you know, where's the benefit there? You know, if I don't try to change it, it's never going to change. Do you know that? Yeah. One of the real values of silent sitting is that we get a front row seat to what our own mind is doing. Most of the time our focus is out there somewhere, you know, or fully engaged in the thinking, worrying, regretting, hoping, fearing, all those kind of things. But one of the real benefits of just sitting without anything to do is to notice that the mind has a mind of its own, right? It just does what it does. You know, when we're at work and, you know, have a project and have something that we're really interested in, we can stay focused on it for a long time. So the mind is great for that. You know, we're not anti-mind here. It's a great, wonderful tool. What it's not so good at is being with itself when it doesn't have anything better to do, because it tends to just go on. It's like a flywheel on a motor. You know, you turn off the motor and the motor keeps going. You know, or a freight train, you know, you turn off the locomotive and, you know, for another 10 miles it's still going in the same direction. So that's good information, right? To notice that thoughts happen. No question so far, right? Thoughts happen. So the question is, do they just happen? Or is there someone in there, some entity that's the thinker of those thoughts? There's a difference, right? If I'm the one thinking every thought that goes through my mind, then all the pleasant, happy, self-affirmative thoughts, I'm on board for those, right? But if I'm the thinker, I got to take responsibility for all those other thoughts too. Makes sense, right? It's an all or nothing thing. Either you are the thinker of your thoughts, or thoughts happen. Right? It's one or the other. And one of the opportunities of just sitting silently is that we can notice a profound inability to control our thoughts. They have a certain lifespan of their own. They arise out of somewhere. Suddenly we find ourselves thinking about some memory, or thinking about, what we're going to do tomorrow, or, wondering how long this meditation is going to take. Whatever the thought stream is, and we realize that, we can try to turn off the thought stream. We can try to think of pleasant things to think about. We can try to be more spiritual. Right? Anybody ever tried to do that? Or you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and something difficult happened the day before, and you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and your mind's on full throttle, and you're not going back to sleep for a while, and there's no way you can turn off that thinking about that problem, right? So maybe that's not true for you. Maybe it's 4 o'clock in the morning. So we can see that this is, just the mind thinking, and then there's something that we're there, we're noticing, we're fully engaged in that. We notice that it's happening, and then the idea that we can be opposed to that with another thought, like a thought that's saying, well, that shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't have to be harassed by that thought. Or I'm way more spiritual than to think about that. I thought I was way past that years ago. All of those thoughts. But we can notice that those are also just thoughts. And we can be aware of those thoughts too. So it's really instructive, rather than spend, 30, 40 minutes trying to control those thoughts. It's much more useful to see just the nature of the thought, the whole thinking structure itself. Just see that, each thought, each sort of particular subject, has an arising, has a certain lifespan, and then at some point you're thinking of another thought. So at some point it must have diminished, fallen back into, wherever it came from. And then you're in the middle of another thought. And then, if you're like most people, there's, not a perceptible gap between one and the next. It's like a giant run-on sentence, one after another. And, as alarming or frustrating as that can be when you're trying to sit silently, if you think that's not supposed to happen, but that's actually the value of it. One of the real lessons to be learned about allowing ourselves just to be in a position of sitting quietly, whether here or at home or wherever, and not having anything else particular to do, and just see what happens when we're not trying to make something else happen. Just see what life is like, sort of when we're not either pressing on the accelerator or the brake. We're just sort of taking our hands off the wheel and just seeing what this feels like when we're not trying to be more disciplined, more spiritual, more holy, more creative, more whatever, just as is. What would that be like? If we're trying to make something happen, then we've got skin in the game, right? We're not an objective observer. We've got a motive, we've got a goal, we're going somewhere. And then we're either successful or not in that endeavor. But the one thing that we don't look at when we're engaged in that way is, I wonder who it is that's trying to do all this. What's that? Seems like a fundamental question. You know, if we don't know what we are, essentially, why are we doing anything that we do? Where exactly are we going? So it's interesting earlier that several people mentioned the term seeker, and as I see it, it's not a spiritual term. I feel like, as someone may have even said it, that we're all seekers in a way, in however way we're exploring life, you know, trying to figure out, you know, how to be happy, how to be at home, how to be feel fulfilled, how to feel comfortable in our own skin, how to be at peace in the world, just those kind of things. So whether we do it, you know, in a, you know, meditative retreat kind of setting, or whether we do it at work, or, you know, through whatever activities that we do, it doesn't actually really matter. You know, what matters is whether we're paying attention when we're doing it. Really. I mean, a lot of times spiritual people like to say, well, this is my spiritual life over here, you know, on the weekends or for 40 minutes in the evening, and then there's the rest of my life. You know, so we've sort of severed life right down the middle. But it's all one exploration, right? All one opportunity to really understand what this is about. You know, it seems like the fundamental question, whether you state it in spiritual terms or any other kind of terms, is, you know, what's this about? You know, who, what is it here that is actually living this life? What's that? And that's one of the reasons that silent sitting is really useful. For one, as we said, to notice that thoughts happen, and you know, it's useful to ask the question, well, are they even my thoughts? I mean, like all of them. You know, useful question. You know, because when we really look at it, we don't know where they arise from. You know, we can say the unconscious, right? That's just another name of saying, well, we don't know where they come from. It's just a little more scientific. So all we can say with certainty is thoughts arise, they have a certain lifespan, and they recede in favor of another thought. Okay, good. So then, you know, another question could be, well, if that's true, then is who I am fundamentally what I think? Or would it be more true to say, well, the thoughts come and go, but there's something here present that notices the thoughts coming and going. So whatever notices the thoughts coming and going would have to have more of a permanence, right? So that can lead us to really inquire, like, you know, is there something more permanent? Because we can see that things like thoughts or experiences or emotions or sensations, all of those things are always changing. Right? Anybody fail to notice that yet? There's one of the core tenets of Buddhism, impermanence, right? There's something impermanent about life. Yeah, right? We can all notice that day by day, moment to moment. We have one thought, one memory, one experience, and as quickly as it arises, it passes in favor of the next experience, the next moment, the next word, the next thought, right? It's not like, we can think of impermanence like birth and death, but we can also think of it as moment to moment. This moment has a birth and a death, right? And next moment, a continuous flux, continuous movement, And, in some ways it can be seen as like, well, wouldn't it be great if there was, if life was more permanent than that, if it was something that we could just grab onto and hold. The good times, The bad times linger plenty long enough. We don't have to worry about holding on to those. So. But if that were true, then, what makes change possible is impermanence. What makes life possible is impermanence. What makes, a tree grow from a seed is impermanence. The seed is impermanent. Life is always moving. And so we can see just that continuous birth, birth and passing away moment by moment. And yet there's something that feels continuous throughout our life. Is that not true? It feels like there's been a continuity since we were children, as far back as we can remember. But it's not our memory that does that. Right? If we really try to go back and, you could pick a date, 2014, February. How many events can you remember? We can sort of remember generally where we lived or, what our job was, but, to replay a video from that any time during that month in real life, we'd be lucky if we could do that from yesterday. So it's not memory that gives us that continuity. And it's not these bodies, the cellular, on a cellular basis, all of that's come and gone many times. Ideas, circumstances, relationships, careers, ideas, hopes, all of that subject to impermanence, right? Flux. But I'd suggest that there's one thing that's not, one thing that's of a different character altogether. And we've talked about it already. It's just this capacity of knowing, of being aware of whatever our experience happens to be. Right? It doesn't seem like much, right? Seems like, okay, that's interesting. Whereas life is exciting, always changing, always the next adventure, the next drama, next hoped-for experience. And so we're, for most of us, we've spent our life looking towards all those circumstances to fulfill us. Yeah. Like the one experience, the one achievement, the one goal that's met, the one idea, the one philosophy, the one spiritual vision, the one that'll resolve everything. It'll be so compelling that the rest of our life we can just think, wonderful. And we can look and look. And one of the benefits of actually having such peak experiences is that they may be extraordinary, they may feel fantastic, and then a month later, a year later, it's like, yeah, that was nice, but I'm sure there's something better, right? And so that's where the seeking comes in. It's looking for fulfillment somewhere out there. Right? So we look for it in all the usual places. Wealth, safety, excitement, relationships, physical sensations, emotions, ideas, hoping that something will be ultimately fulfilling. And all of that's wonderful, part of life, right? But the other thing that all of those things have in common is a denial that what I'm looking for is here. Can't be here already, it's got to be out there. But it seems like whatever we truly are, if it is what we truly are, would it not already be the case? I mean, if we're not what we essentially are at this moment, what are we? I mean, are we some sort of alien life form, an alternative universe, or what? So, just even on a conceptual, logical basis, that if there is an essential beingness, whatever that may mean, there's an essential beingness, wouldn't that be the case right now? And if it is the case right now, and I'm looking for it out there, how long will it take me to find it? I mean, it seems like an infinitely long time, right? If we're searching for something where it's not, it's going to take us a long time to find it, until we get to the point of not being seduced into taking one more journey outward. You know what I mean by that? One more, like, I know this is the answer out in this direction. I'll go there. Then that will resolve it. And again, this isn't, life is for exploring, but it's also about learning. And perhaps we've had enough adventures, enough journeys out into the world that we can see, yeah, they can be fulfilling, creative, wonderful, exciting, juice of life, all of that, wonderful. But we come back to the question, and who exactly is having that experience? Who is that? And if we're hoping to find the answer to that in the experience, in the sensation, in the philosophy, we won't. We can try, and it's good that we try, to the point where we are utterly convinced in our own direct experience that the answer just isn't out in that direction. And it may be not until then that we're willing to look at what's actually happening. And one of the benefits of silent sitting is it forces us to do that, whether we like it or not. And we can play out that battle just sitting there. Nothing else may be happening. Sitting in a chair, not talking, eyes closed, 30 minutes. You can have that entire battle in your own experience, trying to find peace and happiness. I've got to find the right concept, the right belief, the right experience. And we seek and seek and seek. We can do it on the outside. We can do it on the inside of our head. Still on the outside, right? Still, by that I mean, if we can observe it, whatever we're observing is the object within the field of our awareness, right? So it can be a tree, a cloud, a sound, a thought, all of it's still outside of what we essentially are. If there's whatever it is that we are, is what is noticing it, right? Is the ultimate subject. So where's this awareness? When we first hear about it, or maybe even get a glimpse of it, we can think, oh yeah, okay, that's interesting, but not that exciting. It's just awareness, right? You know, where's the beef? You know, where's the juice? You know, where, you know, how special is it? Everybody's aware. But again, I'd suggest it is the one thing that's not impermanent. Everything else comes and goes. And this awareness, just this, the awareness that's functioning already in everybody, just like this awareness, you know, just. In Buddhism, they sometimes call it ordinary awareness, you know, everyday awareness, that awareness, not some special elevated awareness. And we just dismiss it because we just assume, well, yeah, that's of course. But when we actually, finally, at some point, are willing to consider the possibility, like, I wonder if that's actually significant. I wonder if that's actually of importance to me. You know, rather than just being a, you know, everyday capacity of the mind, I wonder if it's actually more than that. It's like a lot of things, if we don't actually take the time to look at it, we don't know how much depth may be there. We just see it as a common phenomena. And it is common, it is every day. That's why we miss it. We're looking for the extraordinary, and every day the ordinary is presented to us, and we just think, oh, it can't be that. And so we miss it again and again. It's not like all of us have had moments where we've slowed down enough to see it, and we've dismissed it 1,000 times. We want it to be something more than that. But when we look at it from a different direction, it's exactly that awareness that has the capacity to notice this entire show, all of it. And nothing in your life has ever happened that didn't happen within that field of awareness. It's been your entire experience as momentary flashes in each moment of the present. And the one constancy has been this spaciousness, this capacity to notice. The only thing that we have ever experienced, will ever experience, that's not impermanent, that's not subject to rust, decay, dissolution. Everything else comes and goes, everything else impermanent, and yet there is this one thing that we're reluctant to explore that isn't, that's just of its own dimension. So I've been calling it awareness or consciousness or spaciousness. I mean, if you were of a more religious persuasion, you could call it spirit, you know, as long as you don't conceive that as some other entity. It's our essential nature. And our tendency, it's not that we don't ever see this awareness, it's that we see it from over here. We see it from the perspective of this body-mind. I know what I am, this is it. And over there is awareness. I can look at it, maybe I can visit it sometimes. But what I essentially am is this body-mind, limited, you know, all these flaws and quirks and shortcomings and good points too. But from the perspective of awareness, it's all good. It's just what it is. This awareness, if we really feel into it, it's not judging us. That feels good, doesn't it? I mean, our mind does, right? What we like to think of is our higher self, you know, the adult in the room. You know, I know what you should be doing, and you know, and then there's the unruly teenager who's not going to do it anyway. So there's that going on. But from the perspective of awareness, the awareness itself is just aware of that whole drama, right? It's like the sound of a bird. It's just aware of it. We don't have to try to be aware of it. It just... Thank you. It's just what it is, right? So, and one of the beauties of that awareness is when we talked about, you know, just objectively being with our experience, when we're just sitting quietly, that's what awareness is already doing. You know, we don't have to, you know, try really, really hard to concentrate on these thoughts, because just that effort, just that wanting to do it right gets in the way. Right? But from the perspective of awareness itself, we can see the nature of thought. We can see the kinds of things that we tell ourselves over and over again that we believe are true, or we're afraid might be true. The judgments about ourselves, or the grievances about other people or situations in our life that we've never let go of. We have a chance to see all that and just see if it's really true, you know. If we can see it's not really true, and we don't even have to try to make it go away. You know, we just see, well, it's not really true, and so, you know, it's believing that it's true that gives it that permanence, you know, gives it that grip on us. You know, if we really believe that that person shouldn't have done that to us 30 years ago, as long as we believe that's true, it's going to hang in there. You know, if we can just see that, okay, well, you know, based on their conditioning and upbringing and culture and what happened in their life, you know, that's what happened. That's what they said. That's what they did back then. You know, am I really in a position to say that shouldn't have happened? That person's life shouldn't have evolved in the way that it did, that caused them to act in that way in that moment? Am I really putting myself into the position of what? The all-knowing? Do I really believe that's true? You know, so if we can see that it's just as it is, it's not to whitewash it, just to see that that's the reality of it. We can argue with that and suffer, or not. Those are the two choices. So if we can see something that we're holding, that we're telling ourselves over and over again, over years perhaps, isn't actually true, or maybe not entirely true, and it sort of takes the juice away from it. It just, it's our belief that it's true that keeps it alive. That's what energizes it. And if we can just see that, yeah, that happened. That's what happened. I got into the situation with the best of intentions. Maybe it was good for a while. Maybe at some point not so good. And I did something else. So the only question, did I learn anything from it? You know, it's not to regret it for the rest of our life. It's just to see, yes, that's what happened. It's the belief that it shouldn't have happened that causes it to maintain its grip on us. So we can watch these sort of mini soap operas playing out in our head. You know, we can do it driving a car, we can do it walking down the street, we can having our cup of coffee in the morning, we can do it anytime. But sometimes it's useful to do it in a more concentrated way. That's great too. But all of those are opportunities to see that all of that mental activity also happens within the same field of awareness. And if we can begin to see that is the one constant factor in our experience, then perhaps we'll be curious enough about it to really investigate it. Like, maybe that has some relevance. And what there's an opportunity to find is that it has a depth that we never imagined. And what we have the opportunity to find in this lifetime is that that is actually what we are fundamentally. The spaciousness, this awareness. In Zen they call it emptiness, right? That's to scare people. You know? It's like it gives you nothing to hang on to. It's just like emptiness. Like, oh my God, that's got to be awful. But it's not really emptiness. It's not like empty, void of everything kind of emptiness. It's empty of this sense of me. Empty of this sense of personal, separate from the world identity. That's what it's empty of. But it's full of possibility, creativity, life itself. That's what it's full of. But without form, right? Formless spaciousness. And you know, when we hear something like that, it can sound scary, like, well, how could that be any fun? But we still get to have this human experience, right? It's not like these bodies go poof. Well, one day they will, but not what we're talking about. We can have this recognition of what our essential nature is as something that has a solidity to it, has a continuity to it, has a reality to it that is more fundamental than these body minds. And it's not something to be taken as a concept. That doesn't do any good, actually. But it's simply an invitation to investigate that. Like, I wonder if that's actually true. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but could it actually be true? And what would life look like then? And the answer, of course, is, I don't know. It's one of the difficult things, because that, you know, moving in that direction, like going down that path and exploring that and pondering, like, I wonder if that's actually true, and how would I live my life if it were? What would that look like? You know, how would I move in the world? What would I do? Would I do anything? Would I get up off the couch? And the odd thing is, we don't actually know. The truth is, we're doing it already. We just think we're doing something else. You know, we're taking credit for it. But when that recognition is there, then we find ourselves being faced with really having to learn to move in the world again. Almost, you know, we're not quite sure what to say anymore. You know, some of the situations that you know, we thought were important in our lives, we realize, well, you know, they're not actually that relevant anymore, and other situations may be. So some things may drop away. We don't know how that will evolve, but it's an interesting journey. And it is, in one sense, we learn to move more and more from a sense of not knowing. Again, we do it already. We just think we know, you know. Anybody planned out their life and expected it was going to turn out a certain way, and it turned out to be something else? That ever happened to anybody? It's like that. We think we know where we're going or what we're doing or why we're doing it, and then life happens. It's like John Lennon's famous quote, life happens when we're making other plans. But we have this expectation, like, I'm sort of in control, I'm making my own decisions and this is where I'm going, but we don't actually know, we're just sort of whistling in the dark there. But it's like that. I mean, we may get into spirituality thinking, I'll know lots of cool stuff. And the direction is actually not in the direction of addition, it's actually in the direction of subtraction. It's the process of unlearning things that we thought we knew. That's much more the direction. And as that, it can be a little disorienting at first, but once we catch on to it, it's actually freeing, because it's freeing us of concepts about ourselves and about life that constrained how we were looking at both of those. Right? If we have ideas about who we are and what we can and can't do, or how the world should or shouldn't be, we're sort of placing blinders on our experience, which is different than when we're simply open to whatever the experience happens to be and whatever that situation requires of us to say or do or not say or not do. And we don't know what will be required until that situation is there. It's not like we have an agenda or even a code of conduct. It's like what's needed in this particular situation, and trusting that there's an innate intelligence to life that will allow us to act reasonably appropriately. And we've all done that, right? When we've, felt comfortable, relaxed, we might find ourselves just saying just the right thing to a friend at the right moment, or doing exactly the right thing. And we've probably also all had the experience of, rehearsing what we were going to say to the friend, or what a situation needed before we actually were faced with doing something. And then it comes across as being artificial, right? Stilted, not really in alignment with what's happening. So there's this movement, if we allow ourselves to investigate this fully enough, is to become comfortable in this spaciousness, this recognizing that what we essentially are is this capacity to be present for whatever arises. The other aspect of it is this formless awareness isn't of the world of form. World of form, you can get hurt there, right? You can get hurt physically, we can get hurt psychologically. Yes? Does awareness get hurt? When we really see sort of the purity of this awareness, we can see that it has been present for the best of times and the worst of times throughout our entire life. It was never not present. And yet, it is untainted by any of it. Still awareness there today, right? Not the content, not the thoughts in our head, but just the capacity to be aware is untainted by any of it. As pure as the day we were born. When we fully recognize that, we realize that, or we have the potential to realize that what we essentially are is beyond harm. Recognize that, and any fear that we have about living this life doesn't make sense anymore. That feels good. That's the liberation, right? You know, to feel, because there's nothing to defend, this awareness doesn't need to defend anything, it just is, right? It's not subject to harm, decay, rust, diminishment. It's just awareness. Then there's a relaxation because there's nothing to defend. I mean, we made, under unusual circumstances, may need to defend ourselves physically or, maybe even remove ourselves from the presence of people that we, there's no benefit in hanging out with. But, I mean, that's all fine too. That's just a practical thing. But there's not a sense of needing to defend this essential beingness that we are. Because we've all had the experience of, trying to defend our opinions, defend our beliefs, defending our honor. But, this awareness notices all that drama. It is not of that, it's not of that same dimension. But it's also not disengaged from it. It is as intimate with everything that happens as possible, more intimate than our own breath. It's not some distant attainment, distant goal, other spiritually hierarchical level. It's what we are. And it's already the case. That's the good news. So our opportunity in this lifetime, it's not a question of attaining it, becoming something that we're not. It's a question of recognizing what we already are. Right? So it's not distant at all. It's all our efforts to try to improve ourselves, change ourselves, have the right experience. All of that effort is a denial of what is already present. The other thing that's possible to recognize, again, not as a belief or a concept, that does actually that's not helpful at all. Actually gets in the way. What is helpful is to ponder the possibility, like I wonder in my own direct experience whether that's actually true. And one of the things that's possible to investigate fruitfully is, I wonder if this awareness that feels like my awareness, right? My personal possession. I wonder if that's actually true. wonder if it's actually this, there's like an awareness bubble here, then there's one over by Barbara, there's one over here. Possible, right? You have to grant it that. But the other possibility is that there's awareness, period, one awareness, and it is being expressed here, looks like this, there it looks like that. There's the uniqueness, there's the you could say the specialness, right? The unique expression. And yet what the source of that is undifferentiated. The one awareness, the one, again, we could use the word spirit if we don't get caught up in the idea of some foreign entity. It's just the essence of what we all are already is undifferentiated from that. One life, one source, one whatever you want to call it. Expressed as, us humans here, that tree over there, the river there, just different expressions. Right? If we get that, then concepts like compassion isn't something that's practiced. It's something that wouldn't make any sense to do otherwise. If there's a recognition that the same awareness that is recognized here is fully functional in everyone and everything that we meet, where's the opposition? It's actually the one and only place where equality actually exists. You can try to manage it on the physical level, right? But it's actually hard to deny that there's not differences in opportunity, appearance, intelligence, what country you happen to be born in, your physical condition, your age, all of that. To say that somehow trying to manage that to make all that equal is fine, it's a noble thing, but if there's a recognition that what we essentially are is unavoidably undifferentiated, that's the real equality. If that's recognized, then everything else is a consequence. And that movement of compassion and love is just as it is. It would not make sense to be otherwise. No more than it would make sense to drop a rock on your own toe. Right? So we've sort of talked about the broad, in a broad kind of way, the journey that's possible from, what appears to be, relatively innocent activity, sitting down quietly for a few minutes and maybe gaining a little peace and quiet, and yet the possibility of exploration in that direction can take us to a depth that we couldn't possibly imagine. And yet it's real. It's not dependent. The beauty of it, it's not dependent on anyone's say-so. It's not dependent on what any book said, what any other person said. It's can be experienced directly for ourselves because it's what we are. An intermediary isn't required. What is required is just curiosity and sincerity and some perseverance, a little bit of courage mixed in. But mostly it's a sense of real willingness and desire to find out what is it that is living this life. What is that? Because as we said at the beginning, if we don't know what it is that's living this life, it sort of draws into question, why are we doing whatever it is that we are doing? We don't know who's doing it. But the good news is we don't have to take it as a theory or a philosophy or something conceptual that we have to put all the pieces together in our mind. That's not actually needed. Actually attempting to do so is just the next avoidance, right? The difficulty for us humans is just to stay with one simple thing. That's challenging. If I were to say, there's a 20-step program, and it'll take you 15 years to do it, and of course there's different levels. The mind thinks, oh, all right, I can do that. But if I said, the whole journey can be accomplished just by allowing things to be what they are and paying attention. Just to allow yourself to sit down, let the mind do whatever it does. Watch it, but don't interfere. No, it couldn't be that simple. So we go off on another adventure. It is that simple because what's there to be discovered is what we already are. If it were far away and, you needed, a high IQ to get there and, years of training, that would be one thing. But the fact that we are what we are already, unavoidably, we couldn't possibly be anything else. So the only issue is just to discover what we already are. It's not far away. Whether it takes 10 minutes or 10 years, it doesn't actually matter. I mean, it takes what it takes, but it'll take longer if we try to make it more complicated than it is.